Welcome back to Mastering Change, everyone. Today we're diving into something we all experience but don't always understand: sleep.
But this is not just any sleep chat, because let's be honest, if fixing sleep was as simple as just get 8 hours, we wouldn't be here. The truth is, for so many of us, sleep isn't just about rest. It's about how safe we feel in our own bodies.
And that's exactly what we're unpacking today with our guest, Heather Darwall-Smith. She's a psychotherapist, sleep specialist, and the author of The Science of Sleep. And she's here to explain how trauma and stress can completely disrupt our ability to rest, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
Heather shares some really practical, evidence-based strategies to help you start sleeping better without the guilt or the stress.
So if you've ever found yourself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, wondering why your brain just won't shut off, this episode is definitely for you. Enjoy. Hi Heather, welcome to our podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We'll start by just picking a card from Esther Perel's card deck to start the conversation. We've not met before, so we're going to connect through a story of some kind, and then we just love to hear your lens on the world of trauma, mental health and well-being.
Okay, so the question is, what I have learned about love from my parents.
No, nothing like a huge banger of a question. Crikey. Oh, that's quite the question to ask a psychotherapist, isn't it? It's a tricky one because I have tricky parents, but both of whom I think have had to learn how to love in their lives. And I think I learned that love is not predetermined, it's not a given, and yet it can become something that maybe you learn later in life. As a child, it might have been something that there's a little bit more give and take, or not necessarily give. But I think I've learned over the years why they couldn't love the way that many people can, and found compassion for that and for their story and their histories, in finding my own way to love both them and my own family. Hopefully that answers the question. I don't know.
It absolutely does. And I think that it's a really telling sign of, someone who is a therapist and who's done their own work when they're able to look back on difficult relationships and have compassion and say, actually, everyone has a story and everyone is often trying their best. It might come up short, it might not work, maybe actually their best might be horrendous, but it's still what they could do with what they had in front of them at the time.
I just really loved the way you what have you learned about love from your parents? Actually, that love has to be learned. That was just really profound insight.
Yeah, I mean, for a moment I did blink and think, do I give you a straight answer? And that is, I mean, that's it. I think it's pretty fundamental to my work as well. And actually so important for so many of the people that I see, that they may not have received the love that you hope a child would receive. But there are multiple reasons for that. And at the end of the day, we're doing the best we can with the cards we're dealt. And parents, grandparents, everyone, multi-generational, it's all the same, isn't it?
Absolutely. So talking about your work, the work that you do bridges kind of trauma and sleep science. So could you kind of explain a little bit the connection between kind of traumatic experiences, or what, these childhood experiences that we have, and how they may disrupt our natural kind of sleep wake cycles?
I'm fascinated by this because biologically we are programmed to sleep, and it's that drive to sleep is so strong that when we get ourselves out of the way, for example, if we're doing 80 miles an hour on the M25 in the fast lane, we could still go to sleep because the body will take that nap, if you like, when it can. And that is almost the key to it, because what is it that gets in the way of this process that is just fundamental? And I think for so many people, and certainly the work that I do, people have never found safety. And if we think about the neurobiology of stress and trauma and what happens in the body, that overactivation that leads to hyperarousal, you could almost see sleep problems as a sort of logical response, because why would you go to sleep if you're not safe? It's the most vulnerable position you could possibly be in. So there's this dilemma, isn't there, between this thing that we do biologically, this thing that we need, and we absolutely need it. We haven't evolved out of it. But if the organism doesn't feel safe, how's it going to do it? And that, I think that really is the crux of where I work, as to how do we get someone to feel safe enough so that they can sleep? How do we do that? And it's so different for so many different people.
Are there any commonalities, any things, any threads? You said it's so different for so many different people to make them help them sleep. Is it literally a set case of kind of talk therapy that you try and help them engage in that kind of feeling of safety before they sleep, or are there other more biopsychosocial kind of?
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, I take a very biopsychosocial approach to my work. So one angle might be looking at the reality of, are you safe? And that's a very tangible, almost a way into the work before someone knows me or we know each other, to sort of understand someone's environment. And I remember, and I talk about it quite often, that the surprise someone might have when I say, can you bring pictures of your room into the session? Or that's one of the things that's great working online. Can we have a look at your environment? To really get the conversation going as to, is your environment what you need it to be? And it might be that someone needs to think about the position of their bed so that they know that they can get from their bed to their door should they need to. It might be that they want to consider having different locks in place. There's all sorts of different things to think about in someone's environment to help them to believe and know that they're safe. Now, of course, there could be a reality that they may not be safe. So these are two different conversations. If you really aren't safe, that's something else. But if you have a history of a childhood issue around safety, you may have left a war-torn country, there may have been stuff happening at home. How can we make the environment that you're in today safe? So it's quite a useful start point to get to know someone and to understand more about what they like, what they don't like. Things like someone might be using a TV to help them fall asleep. It can be a really comforting sound to have a TV in the background, just that noise that someone's there. But we know, especially with people who are highly traumatized, the nervous system is very activated. So our ability to hear in sleep is heightened. So you need to put a timer on the TV, for example, so the sound goes off so that you're not constantly listening during sleep. So it's finding those strands in an environmental perspective, which can be a really nice way for us to get to know each other, to find out more about what's going on here. My work is polyvagal informed. The Polyvagal Institute have taken a look at what I'm doing for my book. The book comes out on the 27th of February. So that is quite a big part of my work, because obviously that is a structure that's really important in this picture. But I also know that no one else in that world is as focused on sleep as I am.
And when people meet you then, so do people come to you specifically with an issue around sleep, or is sleep your sort of first line of inquiry when you're seeing anyone? How does talk to us about your kind of, how do you meet your clients?
That is my speciality. I think it's quite unusual as a psychotherapist to specialize in sleep in this way. Sleep is there's over 80 different sleep disorders in the manual. So it's not just insomnia. And so I have carved out a bit of a niche with that identification with sleep. I've worked in a sleep clinic, so I have a history there where people may have come across me over the years. I work with other professionals. So I work with a couple of neurologists, a couple of psychiatrists who also know my speciality. So I really work with the people for whom things like CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is like gold standard treatment for insomnia, people for whom that doesn't work. That works for sort of 70 to 80% of people. I work with the 20 to 30% where it doesn't. So as I have a background with a trauma training, and I've gone on to study sleep medicine, bringing those two together to think about, well, how does that work? Has meant that people really do come to me. The entry point is sleep, be it insomnia, be it a circadian rhythm disorder, be it all sorts of different things. But of course, sleep encompasses everything. So it may be the gateway, how they found me, but the reasons why they can't sleep might be complex. There may be addiction issues. There may be long-term trauma issues. Then I see a lot of chronic stress, a lot of people with issues around perfectionism. But I think the glue really is there's a lot of extremity in my work, because it comes back to, why can't the organism sleep? It is there's often a story, and it's the other thing that's really interesting about people who do come to me. They might be referred, and it's often people who wouldn't naturally come into therapy, but because they have a sleep issue, they want to and need to solve their sleep, so they'll pitch up, and we have a conversation as to, right, these are different things we could be thinking of. There's different routes for us to tackle this. But actually, is there a longer term process here that this might require therapy for something else that might be going on? And that can take time to unravel. And it might be that someone just wants to come in and go through a very straightforward process of looking at their sleep through their sleep diaries, looking at technical changes they can make. But it might be that someone wants to go deeper and wants to get into the real weeds of what's happening.
So I was going to ask that question, is because obviously if you're a trauma expert and a sleep expert, I wondered whether predominantly the people who came into you or were referred into you were people who already knew that they had some form of kind of trauma, and that was what was impacting their sleep, or whether you do find and it sounds like you have clients who will come in and may not even know they have any trauma histories, may not even know they have any kind of, as you say, need for therapy. They are there because they need to sleep and they're not sleeping properly. And it's in that kind of process that they learn about the other issues that therapy can uncover.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case. It's very common for people not to make that link. So maybe another way to illustrate it is, I may have someone who is referred to me for help with sleep apnea. Now, sleep apnea is a big problem that's really on the rise. And in some ways, it's easily treatable. I don't treat people. I'm a psychotherapist, so there's a very clear distinction between the two. But someone might not want to, might struggle with the mechanisms involved around sleep apnea. It might be they struggle to lose weight. It might be they struggle to use a CPAP machine. But when we start to get into, well, what's going on here? So why can't someone lose weight? That's a huge area in of its own. Why can't someone wear a mask at night? Again, for someone who has a trauma background and may not remember or know that they have, just putting that mask on could open up all sorts of things. So it never ceases to amaze me how very quickly we open something up that is often very, very unexpected.
And what is it that you want to share with this world? What is your kind of key, if you were standing up in front of a community of psychiatrists, psychotherapists and medical doctors, what of your knowledge and practical expertise as a practitioner, what is it that you're wanting to democratize?
Well, my I'm just completing the manuscript. My book is coming out at the end of February, and that really sort of sums it up. It's how to be awake so we can sleep at night. One of the things that's become really problematic is really evidence when there's a TV program on and people are sort of saying, if you don't sleep, the world's going to cave in, or you're going to get on Alzheimer's or X, Y, and Z. Or there's a headline saying, if you don't sleep, your prostate's, I mean, all of these things. I really want to get at, can we stop scaring people? Because, of course, by default, if you are scared, how are you going to sleep? So can we start to ease off? Can we start to look at everything else so that sleep becomes something that takes care of itself? Because it comes back to the fundamentals. Biologically, we can sleep. There's lots of things we can do before we even go near your sleep. Of course, this does depend on which disorder we're dealing with, but if it's psychological or the insomnias, nightmare disorders, parasomnias, these things, we can do a lot before we even start talking about sleep.
That's such an empowering message of biologically we can sleep. Because there is a lot of sleep shaming. You see it all over social media. And in fact, Stephen Bartlett was interviewing somebody who was talking about the importance of consistently sleep with the time at which you go to sleep. And I know somebody else, one of our colleagues who's, really, really strict about the time they go to sleep and the time that they wake up, and is adamant that that is the foundations for health and well-being for them. There is a lot of kind of sleep shaming and sleep, wearing it as a badge of honor, how much sleep you have. It's a social currency, shall we say, or it has become a social currency. Do you, and you've obviously got a strong opinion on that. Is that something that you, do you lean on the research of others? And can you talk to us a little bit about, that kind of the foundations of research and academic foundations of your thinking? Or do you do your own research?
Yeah, well, both. I mean, I studied sleep medicine at the University of Oxford. I continue to study because sleep medicine is a relatively young discipline. It really got going in the 1950s with the discovery of REM sleep. And there's still so much we don't know. The question of that when people talk about timing, strict timing, yes, strict, no. I mean, probably the only thing that I really target as anything sort of solid is a solid wake-up time to anchor a lot of other biological processes that sit on that wake-up time. But we have to be really realistic. For some people to get to that is a piece of work in itself. And I really, really object to this perfectionism streak in sleep. I really object to people sharing their sort of sleep data, for example, when, this is my sleep score. It's well, depending on gender, depending on neurodiversity, there's so many things in play here that make your sleep yours. And that's the piece. We're not talking about as much about how individual sleep really is. And how much, if you take care of your own sleep and let everyone else do their thing, you will sleep better. But because we're worried about what everyone else is doing, we're worried about, and I know the podcast you're alluding to, because I did actually write to Stephen Bartlett about it with my objection. We've really got to ease off. We live in this world of people trying to perfect things. We live in a world where there's loads of podcasters putting out great information, but there's also a lack of understanding of individual need and individual lives. And sleep is very, very individual. So if we think about biologically, every cell in our body has a clock in it. And those clocks respond to external light, it's the big one, the timing of our meals, exercise, lots of different things. But if we can get all those clocks lined up, that's our circadian rhythm, we get a lot of biological functions to work better. So that's going back to the point about timing, I will get people to anchor their wake time, but that is based on what their chronotype is. And the chronotype is whether you are a morning person, a day person, or a night person. And we've got about 15 to 20% of the population who are night owls, some of whom are really significant night owls. Well, these clocks in our body, they don't wear a watch. So how do we work out how our body works outside of an external structure, which has the 9 to 5 and all of those structures? How do we get those two to marry up? So this is the issue. When there's a lot of stuff out there, we are not taking on board the really individual nature of it. With neurodiversity, you may have somebody who has, the average body clock is about 24 hours, 23 minutes. You may have someone who's got a 27-hour body clock, which puts them into territory of a circadian rhythm disorder where their clock is running at a different time to the rest of us. And there are all sorts of implications to this. And I think that's one of the big issues. There are many, many different sleep disorders. There's many different ways to sleep. There's timing is different. And I think that's not, it's hard for me to be really clear because obviously I'm immersed in this world. But when I step out and go, oh, not everybody knows all of this stuff, then I start to see.
Well, it's so I find everything you're saying both empowering because it's liberating from this narrative of not enough, not good enough, but it's also evidence-based. So there's, that particular podcast I just found, having this perfectly pristine person reporting like this amazing health on the foundation of a principle that works for a single person. But the problem is it sticks. It's propaganda. It's traditional old PR, and what it does is it means that people who work on shift patterns, people who whose jobs dictate a different attitude and approach to sleep, are not necessarily liberated or empowered to see sleep as a real additive. It becomes like something that's always evasive, always kind of like not something that I'm nurturing or taking care of properly. Whereas what you're looking at is that kind of starting with the individual and the circumstances, and then how sleep wraps around that, which is something I've not heard anybody, it's really, great to hear that.
I am aware that I speak about sleep in a different way. And I am absolutely militant about trying to get to the individual, to make it individual, to make it yours. Because it's like you might work with a couple and you might meet the couple because one half of the couple comes in with sleep apnea and is having trouble with sleep apnea, but the other half of the couple has insomnia as a result of the sleep apnea. And it may be that it makes absolute sense for this couple to sleep separately. And of course, then they're in a sort of, well, we can't possibly do that. Now, I don't see them as a couple, I see individuals. But if I can get each one of them to prioritize and take care of their separate issues and what is going on for them, their relationship will be so much better because we've targeted their individual needs. And yes, it may be that they cannot sleep together, but if they are better slept, then their relationships will improve. Their levels of intimacy will improve. So we really have to target it. For example, if someone has insomnia and they're not getting enough REM sleep in the second half of the night, their ability to regulate their emotions and be empathetic to their partner who has apnea is massively impacted. So when people start to understand the mechanics of this, it's like that, and I see it all the time. This light bulb moment of, oh, okay, and I make it okay for you to sleep separately. I make it okay for you to have separate duvets. I make it okay if you can and you need to go to bed at 2:00 in the morning and get up 6, 7, 8 hours later. But if that works for you, then that works for you. And that's the piece. Can we get at that? What works for you?
And that's interesting because in this field, we talk about individual first, individual, then how they relate to others in their direct sphere. And then we talk about when we have more empowered, empathetic, compassionate individuals, what that does to community and society, and then that macro piece. So that concept isn't alien in our field at all. But when you talk about sleep,
I think I would disagree. I think it is alien. I think people say that they treat an individual, but the idea is that this is the best modality, or this is the only way you're going to get well, or this is like I've invented this, and this is the golden sort of way forward. When actually, and that's never true. It's always about like the individual, and it's always actually what it has always come down to, and I really believe it always comes down to is when someone feels safe enough in their body, they can start to tune into their body and they can start to listen to what they need, whether that's from a sleep perspective, from a dietary perspective, from an exercise perspective. Some people, will love to run and it'll help them clear their head. Other people like me just can't do that. And it's it's about not feeling, like you said, they're about not shaming people for staying up till 2 a.m. If that's the way that they feel perform their best and wake up and are still performing their best the day after, then that's the way that they should kind of behave. And it really is a kind of, I think, an enlightened way to look at things, to be honest. And you don't hear it that often in this space. It's basically a case of actually tune into what's right for you. And same, it goes across the board from the therapy you choose. And the other thing is, and I wonder if this is the case with sleep, is that let's take therapeutic modalities for as an example. You may start off with doing some EMDR and it's really working for you, and that's what you do to start with. But then as things shift in your life, EMDR might not be as effective as it was in the beginning of the first 3 years that you were doing it, and then you move on to a different modality. Is that the case with sleep? You might need to sleep apart. For example, this couple we were talking about, one with sleep apnea, the other with insomnia. You advise them to sleep apart. They start sleeping much better, getting well rested, working on whatever else might be going on for them. And then it might work. They might actually be better and sleep better, later on, once they've kind of evolved through whatever they've gone through, better sleeping together. Is that possible? Do things change?
Yeah. I mean, things are always changing, and it's. I mean, there's many things in what you both just said. So, sleep is consistently changing throughout our lives, and because of how our bodies are and how we change, it is always changing. So there's that in play. For me personally, my psychotherapy training is mindfulness based, and yes, I will use mindfulness in my work, but not for everyone. Absolutely not. The number of people who will come in and say, "Oh, I'm trying to meditate," and I'm like, well, "Why are you trying to meditate? This isn't going to be your thing." And we get into what the mechanics of that is and why it's not for them. And then so many people are like, "Oh, I'm so relieved because I thought I'm doing something wrong because I can't meditate." I'm like, well, why do you think you can meditate? Because lots of people think the meditation is going to clear their mind. Well, actually, no, meditation is about learning to be with the mind, not necessarily clearing the mind. So I don't know how to do this work without coming at it from a individual person approach. The issue, for example, on sleep timing. So if we think about, I only work over 18, but in young adults, and this is one that really is, I feel so strongly about. We all have these body clocks. So if you're a night owl, it's particularly difficult. When you're a teenager, your biological clock might delay 1 to 2, maybe 3 hours. So the fight in so many family homes is teenagers aren't sleepy at 10 o'clock, and yet they still need 10 to 11 hours of sleep. But biologically, that is impossible. And there we have them in school at 16 doing GCSE maths at 8:30 in the morning, and they are chronically sleep deprived. Problem is, for some young adults, this shift out of a teenage biological delay in their body clock doesn't happen until their mid-20s. So you may have a recent graduate coming out, and I've worked a lot in this area, a recent graduate coming out who has still got that teenage biological delay. And now suddenly they've got to be at work at 9 o'clock in the morning. And they think that there's something wrong with them, that they're doing something wrong. But if they do X, Y, and Z, and I mean, it's brutal. They push themselves into a box to try to fit it. But actually, we've got this biological delay issue, and there's specific ways to work with that. We look at timing, we look at light, especially the use of light, and they may need medication to help with that. But that biological delay that's happening in teenage years and early adulthood then shifts as you go through your life. And as we get older, quite a lot of us become more morning types. So it's one example of how that change is happening and the adaptation needs to happen. That it is specific at each time of life. And if this is happening to you as a young adult, and then you're going to work and your boss doesn't understand that this is a biological issue, you could well lose your job. And then you think, well, what's wrong? So there are actually some simple tweaks to make within that. But if we can get in there and if more people know about it, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. We could really solve a lot of issues if we can get at some of these sleep issues. It's just not talked about, is it? Or it's not even known.
No, it's not. And also, again, there was insight in there that, you can start with a biological issue, which then has the psychological impact of I'm not, squeeze into that box because, or it can start with the psychological impact, which starts to have a biological impact. So you've kind of got this duality of actually, it doesn't really matter where it starts because there's this big kind of crossover in biological or psychological, impact on you as an individual. I've definitely not heard sleep talked about with this individualistic multimodality biopsychosocial lens, and I find it really interesting.
This is my passion. This is what I do, and to me, it's some of it is so logical. And we have a crisis in levels of medication.
Yeah.
If we could get at some of this, we could stop some of that. What were your thoughts around supplements, sort of sleep supplements and that kind of world?
Magnesium glycinate, for example, is something that my integrative practitioner, so every night I'm on magnesium citrate for bowel health, magnesium glycinate for sleep. Is that something you advocate for?
So it's a good question because I'm a psychotherapist, so obviously I'm not a medic. I'm not licensed to prescribe, but I have learned inside out, upside down what the supplement world is. And when I worked in the sleep clinic, the nutritionist there was very pro magnesium and, as you say, glycinate. And for those who find that causes vivid dreaming, threonate. I keep an eye on it. Because I like to be informed, and I have seen people come in with bags of supplements, and there is real risk in that from a sleep perspective. I mean, financial and health wise, because people they are promised so much by these things. You can improve your sleep without using supplements. It makes me very unpopular to say that. You can improve your sleep. You can absolutely improve your sleep without medication. There is a time and a place for medication, and I am very pro-medication when it is needed. Working with people who have become addicted to medication and helping them taper off with the help of their doctor is really hard because they then become, they don't believe they can sleep anymore without the medication. We're then into the territory of addiction. We're not in a sleep issue, we're in an addiction problem. The supplement field has become really problematic. There's a lot of major podcasters out there who are making large recommendations about various supplements, and the evidence isn't clear. And also the supplement market is unregulated. Melatonin's a very big issue, especially outside of the UK. Obviously here, melatonin is on prescription. And I see a lot of people using melatonin but not for the reasons that they think they're using it. They think they're using it to help them sleep, but that is not what melatonin is. Melatonin is a hormone. It helps with the signaling and timing of sleep. So they're dishing melatonin out left, right, and center. People are giving it to their kids, and yet some of the research says that it interferes with puberty. So supplementation can be problematic. You also don't know what you're taking. I mean, there's a number of studies that have identified problems with what's really in the bottle. So it's really complex. If people want to go down the supplementation route, I will always refer on to specialists so that you get a full blood count and you really get to take what it is you should be taking. And I will still work with someone because the psychological and the structural biological elements to what we can do are there. And I can't stop the fact that people are taking supplements, and that's fine. But it is a bit of a minefield. It's a really tricky one. So, for example, there's a lot of research about GABA, there's a reduction in GABA in the brain. So people are toppling up with GABA, and yet we do also know that there are quite high risks with that, that can create other problems. So we have to really think about what are we doing here. So I do know what the different things do. I do know what pros and cons are, but I will always get someone to get a full blood count and if this is going to help you, then know what you're taking and why you are taking it. Because if you know that, you don't think then, I am sleeping because I'm taking this supplement.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's absolutely. Because also then you can't, as you said, like you can't, what happens if you forgot your supplements when you went abroad or something? Suddenly you'd be like, oh, panic, I can't sleep.
Yeah, I can't sleep.
And that's just never the case. Like you say, we are, what was the brilliant phrase you said? We're biologically able to sleep. Like, that's simple fact of it.
There's one question that we like to wrap up with, and that's if there's one thing that you could change in the context of this field of trauma mental health, and what's the one most profound lever for change?
Recognize each other's humanity. We're all humans. We're all trying to do the best we can, and sometimes it's not good enough. But at the end of the day, we are all human beings with the same needs. We all want to be loved. We all want to be seen. We all want to be accepted. If we knew that of each other, could we be nicer to each other? I don't know. Utopian dream, isn't it?
Compassion. Beautiful. Thank you. It was a real pleasure to meet you, Heather. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.